Time. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Eastern Area Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Richard Somner, Vice Chairman of the committee, and I've been asked by Chairman Councillor Alan Macro to chair tonight's meeting since he's recovering from recent surgery. He's unsure whether he'd be able to attend, and he's not with us at the moment. And of course, we all wish him a speedy recovery. Other members of the committee present this evening are Councillors Jeremy Cottam, Paul Kander, Joanne Stewart, Alan Macro is not here, Jeff Mays, Justin Pemberton, Vicky Paul and Clive Taylor. The following officers are in attendance to advise and support the meeting. Simon Till will be joining remotely. Good evening, Simon. Hope you're feeling better. Lydia Mather, Gemma Kirk, Gareth Dowding, Sharon Armour, Gordon Oliver is our clerk, and Thomas Radbourne is our Zoom host. Before we start the proceedings tonight, I'd like to explain that tonight's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present in the council chamber. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Please can I ask everyone present in the chamber to make sure you switch on your microphones when you're invited to speak directly into them, and to switch them off again when finished. I'll re-emphasise that last bit. Please switch them off again when you're finished. Can I also ask you to make sure that you've put your mobile phones to silent and you've turned the sound off on your laptops? He says doing the same with his. If we hear the evacuation alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via the safe emergency exit route, and please follow any instructions given by the officers. The assembly point is at the car park to the rear of the Dolphin pub. And if the lockdown alarm sounds, we will remain seated and await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. When voting, only members present in the chamber can vote, and voting will be by a show of hands. Do members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be conducted before we proceed? No? Excellent. Thank you very much. We will move on then to item 1 of the agenda this evening, which is for apologies. Any apologies received this evening, Clerk?
Yes, Chairman, we've had apologies from Councillor Ross McKinnon, and Councillor Joanne Stewart is substituting, and we've also had apologies from Councillor Alan Macro.
Thank you very much for that. Item 2, move on, members, then to consider the minutes held of the meeting on the 6th of March 2024. Can I ask, first of all, if you've had a chance to consider whether there are any amendments to be made to the meeting's minutes? Councillor Stewart?
I know I wasn't here, and it's a really minor one, but I've spotted a typo. So in a ex-councillor Bridgman way, on page 7, under councillors present, Jane Langford, and it's written as Jane Lanford.
Thank you very much for that. Members, no further updates? See, all of you experienced ones, none of you spotted that, did you? Councillor Cottam. Thank you for that. And to second, Councillor Kander, thank you very much indeed. Members, if you'd raise your hands to indicate that you agree with the minutes. And I think that's carried. Abstention from Councillor Stewart. She wasn't present on the evening. Thank you very much. Those minutes have been approved, and I will sign those before we move on. Thank you very much. On to the next item on the agenda then, ladies and gentlemen, is declarations of interest. Members, anybody that like to or need to make any declarations of interest this evening? No, marvellous. No declarations to be recorded. Thank you. Move then on to the substantive item for this evening. Item 4, reference 23/02965/Bull Madge land east of Goddard's Road and 2 Gables Way, Thatcham. Gemma Kirk, over to you for your presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The planning application for the consideration of the committee tonight is 23-02965 Full Madge. This application seeks planning permission for a logistics hub with associated works at land east of Goddard's Road and Two Gables Way. The applicant is Thames Valley Police. The recommendation is to delegate the development manager to grant planning permission subject to conditions. The application is before committee due to more than 10 objections received and a call-in from Councillor Reid. The application site comprises of 4.1 hectares of agricultural land and a private access road from Gables Way that runs along the side of Extract, as shown on the location plan. The application site is outside of a defined settlement boundary and adjacent to Colthrop Industrial Estate, a protected employment area that is hatched in red on the plan shown on the screen. To the north is the A4, and beyond that, Cox's Lane. To the south is a small portion of agricultural land, which forms part of the wider parcel the application site is located within. Further to the south is the railway line and industrial units beyond. To the east is agricultural fields and sporadic dwellings over 200 metres away from the application site. You can also see a public right-of-way footpath is also to the east with views of the application site. Other relevant considerations of the site are areas of surface water flood risk, a mineral safeguarding area, biodiversity opportunity area, and there are singular and area tree preservation orders to the west of the site. Just to refer to the screen, there's a photo when looking from within the site to the western boundary. You'll note this is where the TPOs and the small area of woodland is. This is the proposed location of the primary access at the spur road as it adjoins the agricultural field. This is taken from the transport assessment, but this is a photo of the access onto the spur road from Gables Way. And then this photo is within the site looking to the east boundary. And you also note there is vegetation on the eastern boundary. And then this is a photo within the site looking northwards back towards the A4. And this is a photo looking southwards towards the railway line. I've also taken a photo from the public right-of-way looking east towards the application site. And then this is one taken from Cox Lane to the north of the application site. The application proposes the main hub building formed of a 3-storey block comprising of 608,000 square metres of gross internal area of office, laboratories and associated ancillary uses. The hub will be 16.7 metres high at its maximum, but does step down to approximately 14.1 metres. To the north of the hub is a 2-storey garage building with yards sitting between these two buildings. To the north at the secondary access is an ancillary building, and to the south of the site is a 1-storey reception building and car parking area. Primary access will be from Gables Way with a secondary emergency egress that will exit onto the A4. Additional landscaping was also proposed within the site. This is the elevations of the main building. These are the north and south, so that we facing the A4 and the railway line. And these are the east and west elevations of the main building. This is the proposed elevations of the garage building, the 1-storey reception building, and the smaller ancillary structures within the site. And then this drawing shows the kind of landscape render and the proposed landscaping as part of the proposal. Members' attention is drawn to section 2 of the agenda report and the planning history for the site. There is an extant outline planning permission for commercial B2, general industrial, and or B8 storage and distribution use at this site. All matters were reserved apart from access. However, the approved plans include a parameter plan which sets out the maximum heights of the development. This is referred to in the update report detailing the free areas and the maximum heights. Just to clarify on this plan, the orange area within the south of the site it was up to 15 metres. Area 2, the blue area, is the central area of the site and was up to 15 metres. And then the pink area, which is area 3, was up to 10.5 metres. This is a illustrative plan, although did not form part of the approved plans, so wasn't finalised, of the potential of development that the extent permission could deliver. This permission represents a valid fallback position. Turning to section 4 of the report, this summarised the relevant consultee responses and the public representations. There were 13 contributors, in which 12 objected to the application. Objections raised concerns with the loss of rural character, the visual impact, particularly from the height, flooding concerns, amenity impacts, and impacts during construction. Now turning to the officer's appraisal. The agenda report first considers the principle of the development. It is considered that the proposed development will comply with the current development plan by meeting an identified need of supporting the requirements of Thames Valley Police and maintaining a strong rural economy. Intensive uses such as offices that are located outside of town centres require a sequential approach, supporting information for the application demonstrated that the applicant carried out searches on site to meet their requirements and found that this site would meet their needs. This review meets the policy requirements for the sequential test. Furthermore, it's adjacent to Colthrop Industrial Estate and in a relatively sustainable location, which would be in accordance with the current development plan. The valid fallback position is also relevant as it establishes the principle of developing this greenfield site adjacent to Fatcham to meet an identified industrial development need and the loss of the agricultural land. However, it is recognised that by developing the land for office development, it would be contrary to the emerging site allocation proposed in the local plan review. The site forms part of an allocation for industrial and storage uses, B2 and B8, to help reduce a deficit of 104,000 square metres identified in the employment land review. This would have a negative impact on managing the district's undersupply. It is recognised that the change in land ownership does affect the deliverability of the emerging policy and that the logistics hub would positively contribute to the undersupply of office in the district. On the screen is just showing the allocation in the emerging policy. The current development plan has full weight and there is an identified need for the development. The fallback position supports the development of this greenfield site and to extend Colthrop Industrial Estate. The emerging policies in which the development would be contrary to only has limited weight due to the stage of preparation of the local plan review. Given the full weight given to current policies, it is considered that the principle of development is acceptable. The next matter is the landscape and visual impacts of the development. It is recognised that concerns have been raised by parish councils and objectors about the impact to the rural character of the area and visual impacts. There is an implementable fallback position for the development of the entire 5 hectares of the site with industrial buildings that would have a larger footprint and greater coverage. The height of the development has been a particular concern. The applicants have sought to address this by making a meaningful reduction in the height from the proposed 17.5 metres maximum to 16.7 metres maximum. The building is now also proposed to be set into the ground by 0.5 metres. Due to technical constraints, this is the maximum reduction the applicants could make. Whilst this exceeds the maximum height agreed under the extant permission, it is considered that due to the proposed landscaping, retaining larger areas of green space, the set-in from the boundaries due to the smaller footprint of the buildings, this scheme would be an improvement on the extant permission. Furthermore, the applicants have proposed to strengthen the northern and southern boundaries of the site with further landscaping. It is acknowledged there would be some loss of rural character. However, it's considered that the applicants have engaged with the recommendations of the landscape consultant and that development would reflect the lower density development on the edge of Colthrop Industrial Estate, and on balance, it would be acceptable. On these slides are photo montages developed by the applicant to show the development in context. It may not be entirely clear to see, but the blue line is the amended height. So this is looking from the A4 westwards towards the development. This is looking from Cox's Lane to the north down onto the site. Again, this is looking from the public right of way. And this is from the canal to the south of the site. And this is from Colthorpe Manor, again, which is to the north of the development. And on the screen now of the existing and proposed site section showing the ground levels changing to reduce the overall height of the development. An arboricultural impact assessment and tree protection plans accompany the application. The tree officer has been satisfied that the impacts to trees would be acceptable, including to the veteran tree and to the TPO to the west of the site. Please see the update report, which includes some clarification on trees to be removed for the primary access, which was asked on the site visit. You can also see on the screen on tree protection plan down in that bottom corner, there is a removal of one C category tree and 30 square meters of a group of tree. Turning to environment and amenity considerations, it is noted that both to the north and the east of the application site are residential dwellings. It was considered that due to the separation distance, there would not be a harmful overbearing daylight sunlight impact nor privacy impact. Environmental health officers considered impacts of noise, light pollution, land contamination, and construction impacts. It was considered that by the use of conditions, for example, requiring plant machinery and equipment to be installed not to exceed existing background noise levels and external lighting strategy would minimize impacts to nearby residential dwellings. Conditions were also recommended for land contamination and construction. Now for transport and highway impacts, the application is accompanied with a transport assessment, which advises that the site will result in 810 daily two-way trips. This would overall be less than the 980 daily trips per day from the extant permission. However, it would result in an increase in trips during peak hours. Traffic modelling has been undertaken as it is considered. It is considered that the development would not result in severe impact on the road network, which is the test within the MPPF. The primary access is proposed from a private spur road onto Gables Way within Colthorpe Industrial Estate. It was agreed this would be a positive to relocate the primary access from the A4 to the new location. A secondary egress is proposed onto the A4. The highways officer advises that this would not achieve adequate visibility displays and therefore seeks that this access is only used for emergency purposes only, where the primary access is blocked or inoperable. The version 2 of the update report has the condition wording that the highways officer felt would be acceptable. Parking, electric vehicle charging points and cycle parking were considered to be acceptable and conditions are recommended to secure these. It's also considered that the site is in a reasonably sustainable location with identified opportunities for walking, cycling and public transport. It was considered that the proposal would generally accord with Active Travel England's standing advice, and a condition will be applied for a travel plan to encourage sustainable travel options. The development is considered acceptable from a highways perspective. The application site is in a mineral safeguarding area and will involve the importation of material on site. Within the Minerals and Waste Local Plan, there are specific policies that deal with these. In both cases, the proposed development would fall within an exception of these policies, where the benefits of the development would outweigh the conservation of minerals and the importation of materials would meet an essential need of the development. Turning to sustainable construction and energy efficiency, the development is identified as being inconsistent with the requirements of policy CS15. However, the policy does allow for these requirements not to be met for technical or economic feasibility reasons. Officers are satisfied there are specific reasons due to the identified needs of the development that mean it cannot meet the requirements of policy CS15. However, the applicant does seek to secure the best possible for the development, and conditions are proposed to secure renewable energies and carbon reduction, with the carbon reduction condition within the update report. The application site is in flood zone 1. However, there are some areas of surface water flooding within the site. The application is accompanied by a flood risk assessment. In this assessment, it advises that the surface water management measures would be used to prevent increase in flood risk both on and off site. The general arrangement plans indicate measures such as permeable paving, attenuation basins, swales and rainwater gardens. You can see on the plans here, there are measures, drainage measures are indicated on these plans. The principle of the proposed drainage measures are acceptable to the lead local flood authority, who've requested conditions for finalised drainage strategy and further surveying of the existing channel at the northwest corner of the site. The application is accompanied by an ecological impact assessment, which includes measures to avoid, mitigate and compensate for harm to biodiversity. The applicant has also been able to demonstrate that biodiversity net gain of almost 40% can be achieved for area habitats and hedgerows. This goes beyond the statutory requirements introduced following the submission of the application. The council's ecologist is satisfied that the proposed mitigation measures and enhancements are acceptable, and Nature Space, who hold the district licence for Great Crested Newts, have recommended conditions to ensure the development complies with the specific conditions of the district licence. Finally, section 7 of the agenda report sets out the planning, balance and conclusion. Overall, the benefits of the proposed development, principally supporting a policing need and associated social benefits, attracts a substantial weight in favour of granting planning permission. There are further environmental and economic benefits that have attracted significant and moderate weight. There are negative implications in which it is considered that the appropriate mitigation is secured. Therefore, the benefits of granting planning permission significantly and demonstrably outweigh the adverse effects. The application is recommended for conditional approval as set out in the agenda and in the update sheet. Thank you, Chairman.
Gemma, thank you. That's a comprehensive report in that presentation. Thank you for it. Mr. Dowding, you're here representing Highways this evening. Is there anything you'd like to add at this stage?
I haven't. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. We will move on then to our speakers for this evening. We have, I don't know whether everybody's in attendance, but I will run through the names of those that I have listed. Parish Council Representative for Midgham, Councillor Anthony Fenn. Adjacent Parish Council Representative, Councillor Simon Pike. Objectors, Tracy Underwood. Applicant agent, we have a whole host of people here. Danny Clark, Darren Barrett and Joe Crowhurst from Thames Valley Police. Emma Wells, Phil Eccles, Tom Ray, I hope I've pronounced that properly, and Penny Taylor, all here on behalf of the agent this evening. We also have an unusual situation where we have two ward members not from the same ward. Apparently this lies across the boundary of the wards. So we have Councillor Chris Reed and Councillor Owen Jeffrey, both here this evening, and you're very welcome all. I will advise at this stage that the presentations this evening, you will have 5 minutes to make your presentation. That is per group, not per individual. After 4 minutes, I can give you a 1 minute warning as notice. And then if that's required, and then with 10 seconds to go, I'll ask you to wind up your presentation. Hopefully that is everything clear. I should have said, members, and you know that you haven't pulled me up on it, so you know the routine by now, that we will ask officers for clarification at the end of the speakers this evening. Okay, first on my list this evening then, Parish Council Representative for Midgham, Councillor Anthony Fenn. You'd like to come forward, press the light on the side of the microphone there when you are ready. I will start my clock. Would you like a reminder? You'll be okay. Okay, over to you whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I need my grandson here. All right, okay. Midgham Parish Council objects to this application on the following grounds. It is an industrial development in the countryside, incurring loss of valuable agricultural land. It is outside the Thatcham settlement boundary, leading to significant forfeiture of Midgham's identifiable physical boundary. The adverse consequences of this proposed development will create unwelcome additional noise, light, and traffic pollution. And furthermore, we are concerned that the hard surfacing of a substantial greenfield site would destabilise the existing high water table and lead to an increased risk of flooding to the Midgham area. West Berkshire Council's 2017 core plan reassuringly states that due to Thatcham's rapid and recent expansion, there should be a period of consolidation, resulting in no immediate and significant growth in this area. However, this application proposes an industrial expansion into rural Midgham beyond the settlement boundary. Consequently, we are alarmed at the prospect of the destruction of prime agricultural land, the loss of Midgham's identifiable physical boundary, and the disturbing prospect of setting a precedent for further continuous ribbon development. The height of the proposed building was originally set at 17.5 metres, or just under 60 feet. This has since been amended to 16.7 metres, but is still a monumental 55 feet high, which would be very conspicuous above the existing single tree line. It would most certainly present an adverse visual impact to the 15 households on Midgham Marsh, situated to the east of this site. Please note that for half a year, this building will be visible through as well as over the deciduous tree line. Provision for 369 parking spaces can only lead to a substantial increase in daily traffic movements entering and exiting the already busy A4. We do not believe it appropriate that the residents of Midgham Marsh and those living north of the A4 should be subjected to a virtual, perpetual motion of traffic noise, traffic pollution, and light pollution. The residents of Midgham Marsh are already blinded by the floodlights operated by Ryder Contract Services on the south side of Colthrop, beyond the railway line and adjacent to the proposed development. We are concerned about the increased risk of localised flooding due to additional surface water as a direct result of existing farmland being replaced by concrete and tarmac. Midgham Marsh, as the name would suggest, already suffers from a surfeit of water. Despite the best efforts of the local farmer, who clears and maintains the ditches on a regular basis, standing water remains throughout the winter months. I personally observed that the northernmost and highest section of the proposed site remained underwater for several days following every downpour, which was virtually perpetual this winter. We are concerned that groundwater will drain off the tarmac and concrete into the aforementioned ditches, which are only just above the current flood alert and flood warning areas, and make an existing problem worse. The site forms part of the East Kennet Valley Biodiversity Opportunity Area, and we are mindful that the core strategy requires biodiversity assets to be conserved. We believe that the urbanisation of this greenfield site would have an adverse visual impact on the character of the area. And so in conclusion, I would say there is great concern amongst the residents of Midgham that increased development would lead to the loss of their rural identity as ribbon development yet again extends its concrete reach. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Fenn. If you'd like to remain there, members, if I can ask if you have any questions to raise on that presentation, please. Councillor Taylor?
Yes, sir. You mentioned the settlement boundary several times at the start of your presentation. When was that settlement boundary last reviewed? I mean, if indeed you are aware of that.
I'm not aware of when it was reviewed.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, maybe I can ask officers later.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, ideal. No further questions? Thank you very much for your time, sir. Okay, next on our list this evening then is Councillor Simon Pike. I've got Councillor Pike coming in via Zoom. Thomas, is that correct?
Councillor Pike is present.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Pike, same for yourself, sir. 5 minutes, and we will start the clock when you do. Please let me know if you need a 4-minute warning.
Thank you. I'd like a 4-minute warning, and I'm unable to start the video due to the host stopping it.
Oh, can we resolve that?
My apologies. That should now be resolved.
Okay, thank you.
Marvellous.
So apologies for joining by Zoom, but I spent all day in the local plan examination hearing. As you'll know, Thatcham Town Council resolved to support the development. We normally do that only when we see a public benefit, and we regarded the use by Thames Valley Police as providing that benefit. We made three comments relating to the height of the building, the need for sufficient EV charging points, and that the roof space be used for solar panels. So that the height, as you already heard, has been addressed at least in part by the revised plans for the application, and the other 2 points are addressed by conditions that you will consider. As you've also heard, this site is the subject both of an extant planning approval in outline and forms a site within the draft local plan. The Town Council was mindful of both of those points in reaching its conclusions, and we felt that development was in the long term inevitable on this site. We felt that this site was this usage is more appropriate than the possible alternatives. So turning to the outline application, which the Town Council objected to, we had 3 comments there: concerns about traffic movement from lorries, the limited employment opportunities from warehousing, and the access onto the A4, which was permitted for all vehicles for the that outline application. We feel that all 3 of those are addressed by the proposed usage in this application. Finally, the reference has been made to the non-conformity with the draft policy and the draft local plan. And I'll just read you the comments that the Town Council has made in respect of that policy. Policy ESA 1 notes that the design and layout should also take into account the site's position as a gateway into Thatcham. We believe that this logistics hub, in conjunction with the proposed landscape, will provide a fitting gateway to the town, much more fitting than the likely alternative use for warehousing. It is likely that this planning application will be determined in accordance with the current local plan. However, this application would not comply with 2 provisions of ESA 1. That is that the floor space would be substantially less than the 20,400 square metres of employment floor space stipulated in that plan, and the access will be from Gables Way rather than from the A4, which was stipulated in that policy. We are surprised that this proposed logistics hub would not be in accordance with the policy, and we suspect that the remarkably precise area of 20,400 square metres is based on one particular application within B2 and B8 uses, i.e. warehousing. And we then went on to suggest that the inspector proposes a main modification to the draft local plan, which would mean that applications of this nature would be in accordance with the policy in the draft local plan. In other words, we think that the non-conformity is an indication of a deficiency of the draft local plan rather than the inappropriateness of the development. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Pike. Well within the time limit there, sir. Well done. Members, any questions at all for Councillor Pike? No, but they are definitely letting you off lightly.
Could I also say that we did take into account the objection of Midgham Parish Council, which we're aware of at the time we considered it, but we felt that the benefits outweighed those objections. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that, sir. Okay, no further questions. Thank you very much indeed. Let us move on then down the list. We next have an objector to speak, Tracy Underwood. Here we go, Mr. Underwood, if you would like to come forward. Press the right hand button on the phone there that should light up. It's already on there. You go. Okay. Would you like a 4-minute warning?
I don't think I need that long, but yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Start as ready, whenever you're ready.
I'm here today to speak on behalf of the objectors. I live in Midgham Marsh, 1 field behind the eastern boundary of the proposed development. I'm the 4th generation of my family farming Kennetholme Farm, which abuts the eastern boundary of the site. My great-grandfather started farming there in 1914. There are 15 other families living in and immediately around Midgham Marsh who would also be directly affected by the development. I am extremely concerned regarding the increased risk of localised flooding due to additional surface water from the proposed development. This cannot be allowed to simply drain into the ditches. Network Rail very rarely clean out their ditches to the north of the railway line. I grew up in Midgham Marsh and moved away 20 years ago while my family has continued to farm. I moved back 3 years ago, and having just spent 3 winters here, I have been shocked at how much wetter the fields now are. Each winter, there's been ankle-deep standing water in many areas for weeks at a time. This never used to be the case. We are already doing all we can by cleaning out our ditches regularly. Should our fields immediately behind the proposed eastern boundary become any wetter, arable farming in those fields will no longer be possible. Midgham Marsh was almost completely flooded in July 2007, and the cattle were up to their stomachs in water. I note that the applicant has reduced the height of the proposed logistics hub to 16.7 metres in the amended plans. However, this is still 1.7 metres taller than the warehouse outline planning permission granted in 2022. The report from the Environment Agency dated 21st of February 2024 also raised concerns about this and recommended that the proposed logistics hub should be no more than 15 metres in height. Living 1 field behind the eastern boundary, the extra 1.7 metres in height would have a massive visual impact on us, our neighbours and many Midgham residents. It should also be noted that prior to the warehouse outline planning permission of 2022 being granted, the council requested that the height of those proposed warehouses be reduced from 15 metres to 12.5 metres. The previous applicant refused to do this. I mention this to demonstrate that at that time, the council did not want the proposed buildings to be more than 12.5 metres in height. The amended LVA photomontages and wireframes that you've been shown were created using a photo taken in the autumn when the majority of the trees to the eastern boundary were still in full leaf. All those trees are deciduous, so the visual impact would be very different for 6 months of the year and would create a local eyesore. The aforementioned report from the Environment Agency also highlights this point. I therefore requested that the applicant create a similar LVA photomontage and wireframe image using a photo taken from the same location during the winter months for the Planning Committee meeting to consider. To my knowledge, this has not been done. The proposed development would create increased noise, light and traffic pollution for local residents. The construction noise would be horrendous. The A4 is already a very busy and dangerous road. I leave to do the school run at 8 AM every morning. I need to turn right out of our lane onto the A4, but this is impossible due to the volume and the speed of the traffic. I have no option but to turn left, drive approximately a quarter of a mile to the roundabout nearest the site, turn round and drive back. The proposed A4 layout changes required by the development would cause huge disruption and delays to drivers if done during the day. If done at night, it would cause disturbance to the local residents. In addition, there is already a huge amount of light pollution from the existing buildings in Colthrop Business Park. The development would also be detrimental to wildlife and the countryside. I own the field adjacent to the site, and I've already been proposed by developers.
You just passed 4 minutes.
While this, thank you, would probably be financially beneficial for me, I refuse, as I don't believe it to be in the best interests of Midgham Parish or the countryside. Ribbon development is creeping along the A4, and if this continues, Thatcham will soon join up with Theale. The proposed site is not in Colthrop, as stipulated, but in Midgham. To conclude, while this application is preferable to the warehouse outline planning permission granted in 2022, I ask you to refuse this planning application for all these reasons. Being a farmer, I am all too aware that we have to adapt and change with the times. However, permitting this development would not be progress. It would be sacrilege to Midgham Parish and the countryside. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed for your presentation. Members, any questions at all for Ms Underwood? Councillor Stewart.
It might be a question that I need to get officers to help us with, but you mentioned about you owning the field adjacent to this piece of land. I'm looking at an image that I can't easily show you, but I'd like to understand where that is, where that boundary is. So is that something that we would be able to do?
Can we bring the pictures up? Whilst Gemma's doing that and to take some of the pressure off of her, is there anybody else that's got a question? No, see, where's the support gone, ladies and gentlemen? Councillor Mays, is that a hand I saw?
Yeah, we visited your farm on the last occasion we were in this position to review the previous application.
Yeah.
At that time, it was flooded right up to your property boundary. The cattle were actually wading in water at that time. Has the situation got any worse in the last 2 years? This year in particular?
It's been particularly bad this year because of all the rain we've had. And there have been vast areas of the field. It's almost looked like we've had a pond or a lake out the back of our house, which is the field adjacent to the proposed development. So I would say this winter it has been worse than it was 2 years ago, yes.
And can you tell me if the Railway Authority have actually done the work on their ditches in the last 2 years?
They have. I have to say they have been out and they have cleared the ditches. I think that was not last year, but the previous year. That was the first time in many, many years that they have done that. But I have to say it hasn't made a massive amount of difference for us because it is still flooded and underwater for, months at a time. It has been this winter.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gemma, how are you doing then? Oh, Councillor Kander.
Hi. I don't know if it's a question for yourself, but have you noticed if the actual field where the proposed development is to go is also flooded at the same time as yours? Or
I think there have been areas of it which have been underwater this winter, definitely, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Gemma has managed to get into the presentation again. Okay. So Councillor Stewart, your question again, please, Wells.
You mentioned that you own the field adjacent to the proposed site. Would you be able to indicate on there for me?
Yes.
Which is where your land is?
So to the east, we own both those fields.
Okay, so that
top
one.
and bottom, yeah.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
And my house is directly behind that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Any further questions?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just for complete clarity on the image that Gemma Kirk had just popped up there, of the two fields, which of those fields were flooded? Was it the top field or the bottom field or both?
Both.
Thank you.
No further hands? Thank you very much indeed for your time. Okay, we move on then to applicant agents. I'm not sure how many of you or who would like to be coming forward. You have a collective 5 minutes. Same process I can go through with the 4-minute warning if you would like.
That would be very helpful, Chair.
Yep, happy to do that. Ready to start when you are.
Good evening, my name is Daniel Clark. I am the Capital Schemes Manager at Thames Valley Police Estates Department. I'm speaking in support of this application. The majority of the police teams who are going to work in this proposed new hub currently occupy a very ageing building within our estate. They also occupy a number of other buildings within the South East Regional Police Estates. These buildings, in particular our building within TVP, currently require a full and very major refurbishment. They have very old and ineffective mechanical and electrical systems. They're very expensive to run and maintain. The building is already demonstrating signs of increased failure, and this is having an impact on police operations. The cost of rectifying on our existing buildings is extremely high, and not cost effective due to the overall structure and condition of the buildings that we currently occupy. In addition to the condition of the building, the policing teams, which are going to go into this new hub, have significantly outgrown their current accommodation, and the configuration of the buildings no longer meets operational needs and modern methods of policing. Staff welfare facilities on these sites is also very poor, and the current facilities do not meet the standards of diversity inclusion that we as a police force aspire and are working towards. The development of this facility will enable Thames Valley Police to release an ageing building from its estate. This will generate a significant overall saving and a long-term reduction in revenue costs. More importantly, it will allow operational teams which are currently dispersed across the region to work together using new technologies in a purpose-built facility to improve operational effectiveness of TVP. This is primarily in support of our mission to protect communities from the most serious harm. Before purchasing this parcel of land, we spent a considerable amount of time with our agents exploring a number of options, and we went out to a rigorous site search process. This process also looked at redeveloping options on existing sites. This site, however, emerged from this very extensive process as best available option to meet TVP's long-term operational needs. As part of the design process, Atkins, our external design lead, have undertaken detailed assessments of all the relevant technical environmental assets on the site to help develop this application. This includes visual impact on trees, drainage, ecology, transport, and access, as well as matters relating to lighting and construction impacts. These assessments underpinned the basis of what we believe to be a well-considered scheme which responds positively to the site and its location. In developing and refining the proposed scheme, Thames Valley Police and Atkins have worked very closely with your team on the Council's planning and technical officers for several months. I feel we have responded positively and proactively to the comments received on the scheme. We have taken on board comments raised by the Council's landscape consultants, and as a result, we have submitted a series of meaningful amendments to the proposed design. This does include a significant reduction of height of the main hub building, with the southern part of the building being stepped down even further. We've also allowed for additional landscaping, trees and planting on the existing eastern and northern boundaries. We feel this will further strengthen the landscape planting proposals and screen views into the site.
You're at 4 minutes.
Thank you. We've also increased biodiversity at the site with a net gain of almost 40%. We have looked at the transport infrastructure, and the outcome from the planning is that our proposed route is significantly an enhancement of the previous A4 location. In summary, we feel there is a compelling case for the proposed scheme on this site. The logistics hub will meet an identified employment need within the area, and it will deliver a significant benefit for West Berkshire by supporting TVP in its commitment to protecting communities from serious harm, improving communication with the public and reducing costs, which is something we as a public body face along with every other public body. All technical matters raised by the council officers and their technical consultees in response to the proposed scheme, including recommended mitigation methods, have been addressed in detail by TVP and Atkins. As such, we respectfully consider that this application of the proposed logistic hub should be supported. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. Members, any questions? Councillor Mays.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Clark. Here. You said that you're bringing other infrastructural buildings that you currently own and operate with into this area, should it go ahead. Does that include the Kidlington head of the HTV? So who is actually coming and from where? Where do we see them? As far as the,
what I will do, if that's okay, Chair, is defer to my colleagues and our agents to answer some of these questions. If I prefer to.
Good evening. I'm Darren Barrett. Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
yeah, the properties you're relinquishing
Sure.
in the foreseeable future, providing this goes ahead.
Yeah.
Will those places be demolished and made available for other development, or will they be completely, will your whole operation be moved to the Midgham site?
Yeah, so this does provide us with a centralised facility. So there's various other smaller facilities that will be closing down. They will either be sold on or, as you say, depending upon their condition, demolished. But that's our intention, is to centralise this type of activity.
So I noticed that there is a large number of garages on the site.
Sure.
Does that mean that your fleet of vehicles, whatever their type, will be actually maintained at this site?
No, so there will be a certain element of maintenance for certain vehicles, but we're not bringing an entire fleet across.
So you'll still be using garages elsewhere for your fleet maintenance?
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cotton.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got several questions, about 4 or 5. I don't know if you can answer them all, or your team can. Basically, why can't you reduce the buildings any further?
I shall defer to, I think.
So we've been working with the client for a little while, and we've been looking at their brief and their requirements to create a modern workplace that encourages collaboration. We looked at a number of different forms for the building, and it was a balance between creating a compact building, which is both value for money and brings the team members together to encourage collaboration and working together. And by having a compact form, then that leaves us more space for the landscape around us. So we have that visual and physical amenity around the building as well. So we did test out a number of different configurations, but we thought that the 3 stories was the optimum for the site. We did look at, we were of course aware of the industrial site and the parameter plans, and we did consider the height, particularly of the rooftop plant enclosure. We thought that it was again the right balance, because it's not it's a smaller part of the footprint. So
you're trading the footprint for the height. So you're making the buildings smaller because it's got 3 stories as opposed to 2, and then dominating it with a wide area.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Maybe you can help me with the other one. What colour do you foresee the building being?
For the main building, we think it's going to be
the one that's actually visible.
Yes,
the highest.
So we're proposing a buff-coloured brick, and it's chosen on purpose so that I think it blends in better with the landscape, and it'll settle better with the landscape. Kind of chalky environment that you see around here, and it'll settle into it's a much more natural colour than, say, a red brick, which would be very dark and very dominant on site.
So a lighter coloured brick.
A lighter colour, yeah.
Okay, and what about the roofing?
We have got it's primarily flat roof, and that will have solar panels on the top, and then it'll have technical equipment to serve the building.
Okay, thank you. So the parking surfaces and other open surfaces, will they be permeable?
I might just defer to my colleague, Tom, in a minute, but yes, I believe there will be a mix of permeable spaces.
Thank you. And with the lighting, are you aware of smart lighting? Will this lighting be controlled? For example, when the presence of vehicles come in, it goes on. Will they also be suitable to our dark skies policy, where the light is projected downwards and as small outlet into the sky?
Yes, that is correct. We'll have controls on the lighting. I will just defer to my colleague, Emma, who has a bit more technical detail on
Thank you.
Yeah, so the lighting will be controlled during the night by motion sensors, like you said. So between the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. be controlled by motion sensors. So the lighting will only come on when a person or a vehicle moves within the site. And we've taken account of sort of the best practice guidance in terms of particularly around bats. We've considered sort of the biodiversity aspect of the lighting as well. So the lighting design that we're working up at the moment will also do the best it can for biodiversity and for bats. In terms of the building itself being illuminated during the evening, it's not a 24/7 operation, the building. So there may be some usage during the night, but it's not going to be kind of operated on a 24/7 basis. So there may be some areas of the building that are occupied and there would be some light from that, but the whole building itself won't be lit up at night.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cottam. Members, any further questions? Councillor Kander.
Hi, a couple of questions. First of all, do we know what the construction timescales are going to be from start to finish if this is approved?
Once again, defer to my colleague. Yes.
We're hoping to get started on site at the end of this year, the latter part of this year, and then it will take, I think it's about 18 months to 2 years.
Okay. And in the main hub, the main bone of contention, I guess, is the height in reality. There's a section of it which takes it from 14.1 to 16.7. Is that for housing mechanical stuff?
It is, yes.
Is that not something that could be located elsewhere on the site away and therefore reduce the overall height of the building?
It is something we've considered, but with air handling equipment, it's best to put that close to the building. And if you put it further away, then that needs either more ducting below ground, affecting the amount we can permeable surface, or it might result in actually more built form above ground because you've got to get the air handling and the air ducts from one space into the building. So we thought on balance it was better to put it on the roof.
And I think I've got one last question, which I think I may have instantly forgotten. Hang on a second. Were you responsible for doing the flooding analysis, you and your team?
Yes.
And was that flooding analysis carried out pre or post the sinking of the building down by 0.5 metre?
That is a good question. I'm going to defer to my colleague at this point.
So could you clarify what you mean exactly by flooding analysis?
So there's a flooding assessment that's been carried out, which is...
So yes, okay.
So the result of that was that done
the
pre or
assessment was
post?
done before the building height was reviewed, yes.
So is there a plan to do it again, given that you're now talking about sinking the building by 0.5 metre?
Yeah, the full drainage strategy and assessment of all things related to surface water and flooding will be revised in accordance with wherever the building ends up.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kander. Councillor Paul.
Thank you very much, Chair. Couple of questions. Will the site be used as a dispatch site or a sitting site for waiting police vehicles at any point?
No, it's not operational site in that there will be no blue lights coming on there or any of those type of functions. As my colleague said, it's not a 24/7 police station. It's not a police station, it's a logistic hub. So it's primarily, as it says, officers and other facilities, not, there will be no blue lights coming wailing at 3 in the morning, I can assure you of that.
Lovely. Just because I'm aware that there are some other agencies that have sitting sites where they can be nearby areas of hot activity. Thank you. Your colleague mentioned that that the lights would come on in the parking lots should a vehicle drive on out of hours. What kind of traffic is expected out of hours if it's not a 24-hour site?
There will be a limited amount, and there'll be a limited amount of, it is an operational site, it is a police site or site, and we are a 24/7 occupation, and there will be occasions, but these will be low numbers, not on a 365-day basis where people will be working either in the evenings or on occasions they may have to work overnight. So there will be very limited traffic, or the intention is to be very limited traffic whilst this happens, and the lighting therefore will come on whilst they move in or move out, and there may be, as my colleague said, a lighting in the building during sort of dark hours, but it's not intended that this is fully occupied and therefore fully illuminated 24/7.
Okay, thank you very much. And last one, Chair, if I may. The flooding impact assessment. So my understanding of when there are flooding impact assessments completed for a building, that they look at the building and they look to make their own building flood secure, so that if water levels rise, their building is safe. Just curious to understand where your impact has actually gone. As someone who lives downstream, I know that whenever there's a development in Thatcham, we usually feel it over in Burfield, because we are quite.
We defer to one of my colleagues on that question.
So you're correct. When you're looking at flooding for a site, for a development, you are concerned about your own building, but it doesn't stop there. So the requirements within national standards and in local standards insist that you look at the impacts of your development downstream, and they also insist that you look at the impacts of surface water that might be arriving at your site from upstream. So it's not just looking at your own building. Does that answer the question, or do you want to go further?
It does, yes. I remember that you answered just a moment ago a lovely question from Councillor Kanda to my immediate right. I'm curious to understand your position on the flood risk assessment when we've had an opposition, not an opposition, beg your pardon, when we've had I forget the person's name, forgive me, who spoke to reject this proposal, where they noted that their fields are flooded. Now their fields, I know the area quite well, are at a similar level to where your building is. Now, if their fields are flooded on a regular basis, I'm curious to understand what your flood assessment says, because either your staff are going to have wet feet or their cars are going to be swimming.
Yes. So the flood assessment reviews the surface water flood risk and the pluvial flood risk across the area. So we're aware of which fields have that risk, where that is within the vicinity. So we've seen that information. It's obviously different depths and different extents depending on what sort of storm we're talking about, what term period, what the rainfall event is like. Our assessment, our proposals, particularly here, we're looking at the site first. So it's been said a few times, this site has areas of standing water. And what we need to keep in mind is that having water on the surface of a field or some land is not in itself incorrect. That's a natural process, and that's what happens to fields when heavy rainfall lands on it. So the approaches that we use in surface water drainage design nowadays take account of trying to replicate natural processes as closely as we possibly can. So within this site and within the proposals we've got there, we're not saying we're just going to pave it all and great, we've got a ditch that can flow up into that ditch and it will go off downstream to flood the farms and the houses even more down there. Within our site, it was already raised about permeable paving. So the majority of the parking area is all a porous type of paving surface. And then if you were to look at the plans that were up on the presentation earlier, the vast majority of anything that's not the main road through the building or the buildings themselves are also porous surfaces. They're sustainable drainage systems. It's all worked into the overall site landscape. So that what we'll end up with is a site that responds to rainfall in as natural a way as possible by having planted systems that receive rainfall, let it soak in, let it slowly transition through those systems before it goes anywhere near the ditches and on downstream. And the same with those parking areas. It can slowly seep into the parking, and then we've got, I don't know, say 0.5 metre depth of storage below that where water is held before it goes off into the watercourses. I would add that the West Berkshire standards for surface water management are particularly stringent. On all of the similar projects I've worked across in the UK, I've not had to work to a more stringent standard before. So that is really providing as much protection for the local community, the local environment as it possibly can. So with all of that permeable surfacing on the site, it should be the case that in the majority of rainfall events in a year, you're going to see very, very little discharge from that site because it's all going to be held there slowly and release a natural sort of response. When you get to anything more than your 1 year return period event, then those West Berkshire standards are requiring us to hold the water back and discharge it at no greater than that, the rate of runoff that would come from such an event, even up to a 100-year return period event with 40% additional rainfall added into that design to account for the effects of climate change, which is obviously, when we're saying over recent years, we're seeing more and more wetter winters and standing water on fields for longer. That is the effects of climate change that we're dealing with. But your standards and our design address that problem. I've gone on quite a long time on my answer to that, but I went on to a roll. Is that answering your question and what you wanted to know?
It does answer my question. So I don't know. So very quickly, most of West Berkshire floods when there's heavy rain, which is, I believe, one of the reasons why we have quite stringent water protocols. And there are people here who are far more experienced in this field than me to talk about it. The thing that I cast my mind back is one of our previous meetings, we were still exploring flood defence schemes for Thatcham from the 2007 flood. It's still something that we still speak about today. So flooding in that area is of great interest. And the placement or the proposed placement of this building sits at a place that's just above the river. So it's going to be receiving a lot of surface water runoff, and it's going to have to hold a lot of water. Now, at the moment, it's a marsh, and that holds water, and it solely trickles that water through into the river. My observation is that your plans do have sustainable drainage, but what happens when your sustainable drainage in the space that you have to hold that water is full? The water then has to go somewhere. At the moment, it's in the ground, and it naturally trickles as nature does into the streams and into the rivers, and it doesn't cause significant impact to the surrounding area. I'm mindful that by building such a big building, you're putting a lot of pressure on the ground, you're squeezing some of the water that's there, you're going to be excavating, taking out that marsh. And I'm just wondering whether or not that's been also factored into your flood alleviation schemes, because you're taking out some of the land as well. And we might be getting into debate here, so Chair, please feel free to stop me. I don't quite understand how far this has been explored.
Yeah, well, let's see if there's an answer and then we'll.
I would say that is not the level of detail that this kind of a drainage strategy goes into. So delving into the manipulation of the land and that groundwater hydrology is a far bigger assessment, a far bigger job than a single site development would ever take on. So that's a more regional issue.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Poole, for your line of questioning on that. Councillor Pemberton, can you remember the question that you put your hands up for?
We're on a roll here. I've got a few as well, if I may. I'll try not to be too long. Thanks to Councillor Poole, actually, for prompting me to ask another one. You'll be pleased to hear. This isn't a working police station. I get that. It's a logistics hub. We've obviously got the emergency exit that comes out onto the A4. If there's no emergency services personnel at this site, why do you need an
It's,
emergency exit.
as was mentioned during the presentation by your planning officer, it is if, for whatever reason, our main entrance and egress is blocked. For example, if there is a lorry broken down and we had to get vehicles out, it's not for emergency vehicles going out on blue light. It is if there is a reason we need to get off the site for whatever reason and we can't use that exit. So it's to use, if you like, airport terminology, it's a crash gate rather than a exit that will be used on anything approaching a regular basis. The intention would be that we would never use it. And where we have similar gates, we have never used them. But we do have to have that facility. It's part of our business continuity and our forward operational planning.
Okay, thank you. How many existing buildings is this hub replacing?
It will replace 2 large buildings, and there will be a number of other buildings which have got people that will be withdrawn, and that will and this is across the southeast region, and that will allow our asset management plan and estates rationalisation plans, which are something in continuous development to look at how we use those buildings. I think it was mentioned earlier, some of the buildings we are looking to sell potentially, or we would reuse for other operation policing, but that is something that's in continuous development. Our asset management plan, or Thames Valley Police's asset management plan, which you may know is actually on the PCC's portal, so it does show a lot of stuff that we are doing across the region.
So it sounds like some of this information is available online, and if I'm asking you information that is, my apologies. So you've obviously done a cost benefit analysis. I'm not necessarily expecting you to quote numbers, but in terms of looking at alternative options of refurbishing existing buildings versus moving the logistics hub to this proposed location and disposing of whatever you're going to do, you've obviously come to the conclusion that this is the most cost-effective option. In terms of ratio, what does that look like in terms of a cost saving?
I can't give you the latest figures, but you're absolutely right. This is by some considerable margin the most cost-effective option. One of the issues, for example, and it's something I think we all face in the public sector, is if we are refurbishing a building, we all have an aging building stock, there is a necessity to move the people out to somewhere else. We, by we, I mean Thames Valley Police, have got reducing estate, so we don't have that spare capacity. So one of the major sunk costs would be to move the people out while we do the work. That also has a huge impact operationally and our operational performance. And that is what I think the primary consideration is, how we maintain operational performance. Do you want to do anything about all? Yeah. Does that answer your question? I can't give you the figures off the top of my head.
It does. It gives me the information I need. And final one, Chair, if I may. You've obviously been looking for other sites as an alternative to this one, haven't been able to do so. Can you tell me how long you've been looking and how many other sites you've been looking at?
When we first started looking, I was a young man with similar coloured hair to yours. We have been doing this 4 years, and we had largely given up. And when this site came onto the market, and it was just very much the last site search we were doing, we had looked at a whole range of options. So we looked at our existing sites, whether we could redevelop those. We've looked at partner agencies, and we've looked commercially. Commercially, there were no sites, primarily because of the access needs, parking, and we have reams of documentation, and we use our external agents on this, and we carried out four major and formal site searches with a number of smaller interim ones in there to try and before this site came up. So we have done extensive work on this.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Any further questions? Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I'm just raising really another subject. I mean, given that you're transferring operations from other parts of the country to this one, to what extent will staff be redeployed to the Thatcham area? And how many people will be deployed, if you can roughly give a figure?
Yeah, so After, I'll answer this in a sort of, in a slightly roundabout way. After COVID, we as an organisation, as most organisations, looked at various different ways of working. So we were able to start introducing various different ways that people could work. So in terms of an overall number, we are catering for around about 400. But what we have done is then done some additional work that gives us a 12% growth factor for future proofing. So yeah, so it will be between 400 to 500 over a period of between now and kind of 25 years, which is the 12% growth factor. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Members, any further questions? No? Mr. Clark, team, thank you very much indeed for going through that. For those that spoke before, that's what the questioning quite often is like. You've done quite well to get off with those so lightly, in all honesty. Thank you. We move now on to two different ward members. Councillor Reid, would you like to come up first? Same applies to yourself, sir. 5 minutes. Would you like a 4-minute warning?
Yes, please, Chair.
No problem at all.
Dear Chair and members of the committee, I am speaking in objection of this application. When I initially saw this was no longer going to be a 7 by 24 automated warehouse with 900 trucks per day, all hours and only 3 stories high, I was absolutely delighted. However, after careful reading and discussion with local residents, I see this application has raised a whole set of new questions. You will see in the agenda pack that a number of points were raised in the objection of this application by the residents of Midgham, in whose parish this application has been raised. A spread of industrial development, loss of valuable green space and separation between settlements, flooding concerns, increased hard surface and groundwater flooding, retaining existing drainage ditches, part of a floodplain and consideration to increase rainfall due to climate change, design and visual impacts, noise, traffic and light pollution following completion of development. So I feel compelled. I have to raise several questions on this application with yourselves as the committee to consider as part of your determination. I am, on the whole, glad to see this would be a place for employment, especially for the police, who I'm sure have a very important and genuine need for such a large facility. But I have to raise whether this is generally new employment for local people for the area. If it's just movement of existing employment within the Thames Valley, should we really be building on greenfield for this? Surely a movement of employment would be better on a plentiful brownfield opportunities in the eastern area of West Berkshire. Have all these brownfield opportunities in the eastern area been explored for suitability? Is this actually a Colthrop land grab? This is Midgham Parish. This is Midgham Parish's gateway to a rural area. It's not Colthrop's and it's not Thatcham's. It's called Midgham Parish, Midgham Marsh, and it's green, not buff. The central part of the 3-storey office building is just under a staggering 50 foot in height, which is around the same as the original warehouses that were given permission some years back, and would be considerably conspicuous above the existing mature tree line. Surely a logistics hub could be reduced in height and by judicious design of footprint be less imposing on the landscape of rural Midgham Parish, which has no other buildings close to such an imposing scale within its boundaries. The proposal, in my humble opinion, glosses over the risk of flooding. For your information, and as you've heard, the aftermath of the winter storms, the northern and highest section of the field was underwater for a significant period of time. What does the loss of this needed flood meadow mean to the homes further down the Kennet Valley? Are we spreading the blights of flooding risk to other residents in West Berkshire and to the railway line and the main freight route of the A4? The proposal includes provision of 369 car parking spaces, which would involve excessive daily traffic movements and covering off the green field. Would this further impact drainage? Is there genuine effort to encourage the use of Thatcham train station? Could a shuttle bus to and from the station reduce the need for parking spaces? What additional active travel encouragement should be set as a condition? And finally, the question of the environment and ecology. This is a further closure of the much needed green corridor between the AONB to the north and Pang Valley and the shrinking Kennet Valley due to ongoing development.
4 minutes.
The map to me shows very little width to the needed wildlife corridor to the east of the proposed building for the north-south movement between the blue-green corridors of Pang Valley to the north and Kennet Valley to the south. Surely we should be looking to widening the hedge more than a skinny one tree width illustrated. This is hardly cover or encouragement for wildlife. Remember the council's local plan SB 17 for North East Thatcham intends to put 32 acres of Midgham under the developer's bulldozer right up to the edge of Cox's Lane opposite this development site. We should not lose any opportunity to counter this disastrous decision with an opportunity to balance or even enhance retaining important ecological corridors joining the last vestiges of our natural environment in the eastern area.
You can summarise, please.
I put these questions for the committee's consideration for their determination.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions for Councillor Reid? Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Reid, out of curiosity, how many residents had approached you regarding this application in your ward?
There was great question. Well, there's certainly 12 objections. I met at least 8 of them. They turned up at the parish council meeting at Midgham, which is actually, Midgham itself is quite a low population. So I'd say it was probably one of the best attended parish meetings. It's also raised at Woolhampton as a concern as well. So Woolhampton Parish, which is the next one down. And obviously their concern is that they will be linked eventually to Colthrop as part of Ribbon development.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask a follow-up?
Of course.
As part of your discussions with the residents in your ward, was there anyone in favour of the development?
Fear of?
In favour of the development?
No.
Thank you, Chair. That's it.
Okay, no problem. Any further questions? No? Councillor Reid, thank you very much. Councillor Jeffrey? Do you like 4-minute warning? Okay, ready when you are.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm a neighbouring ward councillor. Well, not entirely. I've got about 50 yards, I think. And I'm urging approval of an application of which I do not approve. About 18 months ago, the previous Eastern Area Planning Committee agreed after a tied vote to permit an appalling travesty of a planning application to be approved. We had cross-political party opposition, we had cross-town and parish common positions opposed to an utterly inappropriate 24/7 HGV delivery and exchange depot. It was approved. As a result, an application that I would otherwise be utterly opposing, I support. If this application is approved, then we can be pretty convinced that Thames Valley Police will proceed and they will get their long worked on plans put in place. Once that happens, there is no realistic prospect that the previous ghastly approval could ever come back to life. For that reason, I am supporting this application broadly as it stands. I would also hope that you can get somewhere as a committee with getting the height of the main building down. I don't know how that can be done. I would have thought personally that even if it were to be spread out a bit and made a little bit wider on the site, that would be better than having it as high as it is being proposed. But for those reasons, I will support I do wish to state that I support this application. Could it be improved? I think it can be improved, and that, good friends, is up to the members of this committee to try to achieve. But the fundamental principle is one that if we get the Thames Valley Police Technical Centre, we will absolutely scuff out the possibility of that dreadful HGV site that was approved foolishly by this planning committee a year or 18 months ago.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Jeffrey. Any questions for Councillor Jeffrey members? No? No? Thank you very much indeed, sir. Oh. Okay, thank you to everybody for your contributions this evening. We will move on to the next section now, which is to invite members to ask questions of clarification of the officers, possibly from anything that you raised earlier or possibly for new stuff. Members, any questions, please? Councillor Mays.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I have a number of queries that may come up under this heading. If we're looking at the extent planning application, what is the position as far as I gather that there has been a change of ownership of the land. In that case, how can the previous extent application approval be considered in the future?
Okay.
I don't understand the logic. If the landowner has changed, how we can either consider the previous one as being valid?
I think the answer to that is you don't have to own the land to put an application in, but I'll go to officers.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll take this one. Planning permission runs with the land, not the ownership of the land. So somebody can submit a planning application for a piece of land. They gain planning permission. They sell on that piece of land with that planning permission attached to it. And the planning permission remains potentially implementable for the duration until the planning permission expires. So I can assure you that in this case, officers have reviewed the planning situation regarding the previous planning permission, and it represents a valid fallback position, which members should be mindful would be a valid fallback position at appeal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till.
Yeah, can you just confirm that the Thames Valley Police have actually purchased the land we're talking about?
Thank you, Chairman. Again, planning permission runs with the land, not the landowner. So it's irrelevant in planning terms whether Thames Valley Police have purchased or intend to purchase in the future. As you're probably aware, members, often land negotiations are done subject to planning permission. So in the event that potentially if Thames Valley Police haven't purchased this site, in the event they didn't gain planning permission, they may not purchase the site, in which case a future purchaser may wish to implement the 2021 planning permission that is extant on the land. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. I can confirm, Councillor Mays, that I'm getting a nod from the back from Mr. Clark that they have, was mentioned in his presentation, I think, that they have purchased the land. Okay, any other questions? Councillor Pemberton, I'm going to come to you first.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm curious to know how flood risks are assessed, categorised, whatever terminology you use. paragraph 6.88 of the report that was sent through to us talks about, for example, low surface water flood risk on the southeastern corner of the site. Well, we've heard from objectors tonight to the east of the site that would regard the risk to their land as anything but low. So I'd just be interested to kind of explore that and how that is approached from a risk perspective. And also, the flood risk doesn't seem to appear anywhere in the planning balance. And that worries me a little bit because to me, this is a valid issue. Thank you.
Who would like to pick this one up? Lydia?
Thank you. So in terms of the planning balance, it's one of the matters where officers consider that there are conditions which can mitigate the impact, and those are recommended conditions. So there's quite a detailed surface water drainage condition. And it is in 7.5. So it's regarding the environmental impact, including surface water. So they're given neutral weight in the planning balance because they can be mitigated by condition. Would you, sorry. So I think I've answered your second point rather than the first. The first related to how it's assessed and the risk. The risk, yeah. So land is identified in terms of flood risk zones, and the site itself is in flood risk zone 1, which is the lowest risk of flooding. I appreciate that that doesn't mean that the site never floods, but in terms of the Environment Agency and how they designate land, it relates to flood risk. There is obviously a higher flood risk at the lower ground level beyond the site, which is in flood zone 2, I believe. Sorry, I might need to check the plan. But the site itself has a risk of surface water drainage in places, but is not in a high risk flood zone in terms of the Environment Agency's designation.
Okay, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed within the planning history, we're looking at page 33 of the document that we've all been shared, that the previous planning application 21-02130-OUT-MAJ notes that the buildings permitted for development are up to 15 metres. And I know that there's been a lot of discussion today about the height of the proposed buildings. Now, the other buildings that are on the opposite side of the industrial park are lower than these buildings. I'm conscious of having such a high building setting a precedent. So what's been the mindset, or what's been the evaluations regarding allowing such a high building? Because that's not covered as part of the previous planning application. Thank you.
Thank you.
So officers made an assessment under paragraph 6.38 and 6.39 about acknowledging that the previous permission was agreed at a maximum height of 15 metres and that this proposal would be higher. And we considered in this case that because of the smaller footprint and the land area coverage overall, so it's a smaller site area than what is proposed in the allocation and what is on the extant permission, as well as providing proposed landscaping on the north and eastern boundaries, and also retaining areas of large green space. We felt that on balance, that the height was acceptable at 16.7 metres. So we had considered that in relation to the outline permission.
Also, just the report notes that an external landscape consultant has reviewed the application, and the reduction in height was in a response to their comments, along with the additional landscaping that's proposed. So their comments are also taken into account in terms of the overall footprint and height. And on balance, we consider it to be acceptable. We don't disagree that it will be visible. Obviously, it's not, yeah.
Yeah, and just further point of clarity, was the external consultant that was appointed by, or was the external consultant appointed by West Berks or by the client?
By West Berks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Just to continue with the line of questioning about the height of this particular application. This is a question about process, really. Councillor Jeffrey, to begin with, confused me with his whether he supported or didn't support, but then I got it in the end, so thank you. And very eloquently, I think, said about this committee doing something about the proposed height of the building. Now, we're here to assess a particular planning application. Am I right in thinking that we can set conditions and we can lay out certain sort of conditions and things like that, but with something like the height and suggesting that the footprint of the building should be larger, is that actually something in planning terms that we can set a condition for? Or would it be a case of, and I'm not leading us into debate, I hope, would it mean that we would need to refuse this application because we actually think that it should be a lower height than has been proposed?
Thank you for your question. I think I know the answer. Mr. Till has his hand up and I'm sure he'll be doing it much more eloquently than I.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor, for your question. It is the case that while there are certain matters that can be addressed through condition, we as the local planning authority should be very careful not to get into the territory of trying to use conditions to redesign the scheme for an applicant. So in the case of the general built form parameters, you're correct that that is not the function of conditions. In terms of the committee's options, and I should come back to that by saying that the NPPF sets out certain tests of conditions, and one of those tests has to be that the condition is reasonable and relates to the development that is proposed. In terms of the committee's options, should they choose instead to have concerns regarding the height or layout, obviously the committee has the option to seek to refuse the application on those grounds. The committee could also defer consideration of the application to allow officers to negotiate with the applicant on further amendments to the building, should they choose to do that. Now, the applicant may choose to seek to amend the building under those circumstances in terms of the height and layout, but they may also decline to do so. And in this case, your officer's recommendation is that on balance, I'm sorry, I'm slightly losing my voice, I'll persevere. On balance, the height of the building in our consideration, and having reference to what was previously approved at 15 metres, is not a significant increase. You're talking, because of the set down of the building, 16.2 metres. We don't consider that additional 1.2 metres to be a significant increase in terms of landscape impact. And as the case officers referred to already, the actual footprint of the building reduces the visual impact by confining that 16.2 metres height to a smaller area overall. So we view this as a betterment overall over the previous planning permission. But as I've said, members, you may take a different view over that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. Please do have a sip of drink. Does that answer your question, Councillor Stewart? Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions, members? Councillor, oh, look at you two fighting over it again. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, everybody's favourite subject, sustainable construction, energy efficiency. These BREEAM conditions, which in my brief experience never seem to be met. There's lots and lots of exceptions to them. So where a building can't comply because of technical and financial reasons, they're obviously referred to in the report as 6.83. Can officers shed any light on what those technical or financial reasons might be? Or if not, what inquiries were made as part of the planning application to find out what they were and whether those exceptions were reasonable?
Who would like this one? Lydia?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the question. So on the sustainable construction, there was information submitted. It's sensitive information that was disclosed to us and has been reviewed by technical officers in the council. And we're content that the maximum that can be achieved, bearing in mind the applicant's requirements for the building, has been maximised, and those are the conditions which are recommended. So it has been assessed, information has been submitted, and there are requirements for that to be achieved as part of the recommendation with the conditions.
Okay, thank you. That's a wry smile, Councillor Pemberton. Does that mean you have a follow-up to it, or are you okay with that? You're okay. Councillor Poole.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed that within the, what do you call it? Section 4, the consultation, that the West Berkshire Lead Local Flood Authority noted that they had no significant objections. But during the presentations this evening from the applicant, I noted that they hadn't completed a flood assessment review following the building being sunk. So I'm just wondering whether or not the comments within 6.86 to 6.9 are accurate.
Lydia?
Thank you. Yes, so the flood authority has been consulted on the amendments. Those comments are based on the proposal in front of you as amended. So they are of the view that the conditions that they recommend regarding surface water drainage can be achieved with the amendments.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, I'm coming back on this one. I noticed that the applicant had said that there hadn't been a further flood assessment following the building redesign where it was going to be, the height was lowered. So obviously that would then have an impact to the flood assessments. So if they haven't completed their own report, how can we then have statements in the report for the members of this committee to consider regarding flood?
Sorry, Gemma's corrected me. So may I just have a minute?
Of course.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor, you had a point earlier on. Would you be raising it to officers just as a reminder that you were talking about boundary lines? Yeah. You not I'll wait till they finish this, but just want to make sure that you still would want to.
Sorry, Chairman, would it be possible to have a 5-minute break? Because I need to be able to give a correct answer.
Yes, I think that's acceptable, Mr. Palmer. Yeah.
I put my microphone on. If members think it would be useful to get an answer to that question, then I suggest we do adjourn for 5 minutes.
Members, everybody in agreement with that? Yeah, let's take a 5-minute adjournment then. Thank you. And you said of the jury then, there was some.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that we checked all the correspondence on the file. So the local flood authority weren't specifically consulted on the amendments to the height and the reduction in the ground level. The reduction is 50 centimetres. The information and assessments are based on parameters which are established around groundworks. The underwater table information will be the same, and the parameters for failure due to a change in levels will be revisited at the point of the pre-commencement condition. So it's a pre-commencement condition regarding the drainage. The requirements of the condition will not change. So we were satisfied that drainage have not been consulted on those revisions. The failure parameters and mitigation still need to be met. The applicant has accepted the condition as a pre-commencement, meaning that they consider they can comply with its requirements and can submit that information irrespective of that change. So I'm sorry earlier that I assumed that we had, but not specifically on the height. We had quite a lot of work on the drainage as referred to earlier, but not on that particular matter. If members feel that they don't feel confident in the drainage matters, then you may wish to defer until further details are submitted. But we are confident that the condition can be met. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Lydia, and thank you for taking the time to go through the detail on it. Councillor Paul, did you want to come back on anything?
I'd just like to say thank you to the officers for taking the time to find that information. That was incredibly useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
And thank you, Chair, for reminding me yes, so earlier the parish councillor mentioned that the site is outside of the settlement boundary. Really, my question is, and I think it would be quite useful to know this because it's barely mentioned in the report papers, is when was the settlement boundary set and when was it last reviewed?
Okay, thank you. Do we have that information, Lydia?
Yeah, so the settlement boundaries relating to sort of residential settlements were reviewed as part of the housing site allocations policy document, which would have been 2017. In terms of the protected employment area boundary, that's obviously ongoing as part of the local plan review where this site is proposed to be included in the boundary for the protected employment area. But the assessment is based in terms of the protected employment area on the current boundary.
So, yeah, I must admit, I'm less familiar with protected employment. So is the protected employment boundary different?
To the settlement boundary? Yes.
In this particular case?
Yes, I believe so.
Are you saying it falls within, this site does fall within that boundary?
No, it's outside settlement. Sorry, it's outside settlement and outside the existing protected employment area.
It's outside.
But the local plan review is proposing to include it in the protected employment area, not the settlement boundary, to my knowledge.
Okay.
Does that answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Kander.
And I know maybe we're going over some old ground, and I just wanted to try and clarify something with regards to the height of the building. So when the assessment was made to go higher rather than wider, because it was deemed to be better, how has that worked out? Because from my viewpoint, considering it's above the previous extent planning permission anyway, and is higher than neighbouring developments, I would have thought there would have been a greater weight on spreading it out more rather than having it high, so it's very visible.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'll take that one. So this is to a certain degree an interpretation in terms of design. In those terms, there's little difference between 15 metres and 16.2 metres, very limited in terms of wider, longer range visual impacts. But in terms of expanse of building, about 15 metres with a wider expanse, you're talking a greater area of impact, more obscuring of longer views. So in your officer's view, in this case, because we're talking a very marginal difference in height, the more confined impact of that is preferable to a larger spread. In the same way that we might talk about urban development, a more confined impact being preferable to sprawled impact. So as I've said before, members may take a different view on this point. It is quite a finely balanced point in terms of design, but your officer's view on that balance is that the more confined impact with a very slightly higher ridge is better in terms of long-term, longer distance landscape impacts than the spread impact of the previously approved development. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Till. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Members, any further questions? I have just one, and you may or may not be able to take Chairman's prerogative right at the end. And it's with regards to the flood alleviation schemes. So East Thatcham, I believe, is still under construction. Southeast Thatcham, we've got a couple. From your point of view, are those flood alleviation schemes specifically designed to cope with the area as far as this development is proposed?
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'll take team leader's prerogative on this one as well.
Thank you.
If I can keep my voice. So the flood alleviation schemes, to my understanding, and I have had a great deal of involvement over the years in them, are designed primarily to protect the eastern parts of the residential development and the extant Colthrop development. In terms of this scheme, the requirements in terms of surface water drainage are different to the conditions under which those developments, the residential development east of Thatcham and the Colthrop development as it stands today, were developed. So they had limited and poor surface water mitigation measures, which then in 2007 caused widespread flooding across those developments. If they'd been designed today, then as you've heard actually from the applicant's own representative, the standards applied would have been massively more stringent, and in part those standards exist today because of exactly the flood events that took place in 2007 and sadly affected many residents and businesses across Thatcham and the wider district. So as part of the flood alleviation, the surface water drainage measures via the condition, you'll note at point F that the required runoff rate from this development is no greater than 1-on-1 green field, i.e. it's not to be any greater than present runoff from that site, which is, as noted, currently a greenfield site. So in terms of managing flood risk, the prerogative there is to manage it via on-site drainage measures and to prevent water displacement to other areas. That's quite crucial within modern SUDS design, and it's an objective within the Council's publication of the supplementary planning guidance on flood risk and drainage and surface water drainage measures that we published in 2018. In that respect, no, the flood mitigation schemes, as I understand it, are designed to address the extant development in Thatcham with some future capacity. But primarily, we're looking at the drainage measures on this site, addressing the drainage requirements for this site and any off-site displacement that might be created by this site. Thank you, Chairman. I hope that made sense.
It did. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Till, for persevering. Members, I think we've had a very, very in-depth round of questions there. I'm inclined now to move us on to debate. Who would like to start the ball rolling? Councillor Cotton.
Thank you, Chairman. I was here when the previous planning permission was given. I vigorously opposed that. I totally sympathise with the parish and the local farmers' views on this. I think it was wrong to go ahead, but we are where we are. So we have to review where we go from here. This, I tend to agree with my colleague and basically look at this as a mitigation of what is allowed. Sorry, word choice there. Basically, I see this in the same way, and I would say that we need to review all of the flooding points, and I think that has been done completely by our officers. I was in the 2007 floods wading to schools to collect my children. So I take this matter very, very seriously. I said I was in principle against it, but now we have an outline permission. And we basically we can't revoke that. That's there and it's done. And my horror was the 900 lorry movements per day that would be created by automated warehouse, which would have maybe created half a dozen jobs. But certainly this is totally different. We have a very responsible and trusted landowner, one of our own emergency services. And when considering that, imbalanced decisions, that is one of the things I personally, as a councillor, take on to board. It will also have the benefit of quality jobs for the site. So it's a win-win as far as the type of application that goes on there. We have no choice. We have to have something that goes on there. If the police don't get the permission on this, they could appeal, but I don't know if that's their inclination. They might move away and sell on the actual site to a commercial developer. I think we can trust them to basically obey to the letter all of the conditions that we might feel about the flooding issues. I asked questions and basically it was a compromise on the footprint of the building to the height of the building. The wider the footprint, I think the higher the risk of water being created flood areas, because it's larger and taking up a larger area than a lower building. So I would say that I will listen to obviously the debate and the other views. Yes, there is, water is a very big issue in this site, and I'd like to hear others' views on this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cotton. Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm going to get in early deliberately because I agree with much of what Councillor Cotton has just said, and I sense there's going to be dissenting views around the table. If colleagues wish to try and persuade me otherwise, I'm more than kind of happy to listen. Look, I've got concerns about this application. I've got big reservations about the potential for flood risk. We know what those reservations are. We've discussed them at length. I'm not going to repeat them any further. I was moved by some of the comments of one of the objectors in the field adjacent to the proposed site and some of the difficulties that they'd had farming the land and obviously cows and other livestock finding themselves wading around in foot deep water. I can understand why they are concerned. But equally, I'm satisfied that a huge amount of work has gone into this. The more of these planning committees that I attend, the longer these drainage and suds conditions seem to get. And it's a precondition, which satisfies me that there's adequate mitigation in place to make sure that the applicant is doing everything that they can to address those concerns before a spade even goes into the ground. And we could defer this and we could see if there's a conversation to be had around playing about with the building's height. But ultimately, I don't know what it's going to achieve. I suspect, again, from the detailed discussion that we've had tonight, there probably isn't any scope to do that. And even if you do reduce the height of the building, that's going to cause different issues in terms of building density. So my inclination would be to approve this, but colleagues may have a different view. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Poole.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually been quite nice to look at this because as someone who moved into the West Berks area, one of the things that I noted when I moved in was the lack of enhanced level training opportunities, and because everything seemed to be further afield. So I was particularly pleased to see a development for Thames Valley Police where it's the labs. It's very complex work. There's lots of research that goes in there and it's very attractive. There's also a lot of work within the Thames Valley area that sits within West Berkshire that's connected to the police. So it really did seem to be a natural fit. However, after looking further into the application, I do feel that where developments are being made, there could be additional considerations in order to keep the development in keeping with the area. And there are a lot of other buildings that are going up. And whilst I hear the comments from the presentations today about creeping developments and eventually building up along the A4, we have to take each planning application on its own merits. The things that concern me about this planning application is its height. And whilst we can explore this and to death, I do feel that with the existing planning application being present for up to 15 metres, I do feel that that is in keeping with the other commercial properties within the area and with other regulations for commercial properties. I do feel that by maintaining buildings to that height, it would reduce the impact to the flood risks. Speaking of floods, I am somewhat concerned that the second flood risk assessment hasn't been completed prior to coming to the session tonight, and I would prefer to review an application of this size and of this merit with all of the relevant pertinent information. I have complete confidence in the officers that they will make sure that that whatever flood risk assessments come through following the reassessment, that any building developments would be done in accordance. For my own preference, I would like to have that information reviewed before such things come to this committee. For nothing more than I live downstream, and the main road that runs through my ward that connects my ward into central Reading, when that becomes flooded, it's impassable and has significant transport impacts. So whilst I'm bringing that to the table as well as part of my considerations, I'm still in two minds on this one. I think I'd like to hear for more conversations from the other delegates, if I may, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, any further comments, considerations? Councillor Taylor.
Yes, firstly, can I say I didn't really know much about the earlier application until I started to read the documentation. Obviously, I wasn't a councillor at that time, but I think that's a major consideration, and I'm sort of certainly swayed by the I think it was the last behind me. I don't know if he is still behind me now, but yes. And the argument that he put that this is perhaps the I hate to use the word sort of lesser of two evils, but we don't really want to. It's it seems to be a very negative step if we did fall back on the earlier application. So my inclination, I think I agree with much of what the three previous speakers have said, and my inclination I'll be honest, it would be to support the application.
Okay, are you holding off from a proposal at this stage, or is that? We'll carry on talking. Councillors, I've got Councillor Stewart and then Councillor Kander.
I'm not entirely sure that I'm going to say an awful lot different, but I think I need to express my views on this. I never really thought when I started looking at this application that it might impact where I live. And in fact, like Councillor Poole, we live along by the Holybrook, which is fed by the Kennet. And only very recently, we had some flooding, quite severe flooding, and it actually did almost reach some of our houses. And that's in 2007, it did not come up that far because I've lived there for many years. So it's interesting when you think about that and that downstream impact as well. Thank you to Mr. Till for explaining what would happen if we were going to try and if we were minded to defer the application in terms of the height question. Clearly, that's of concern to residents, and I can understand that. But I think also we need to really think about the fact that the impact, as has been mentioned, of increasing the footprint to accommodate a reduction in height, I think could be something that would make quite a serious difference. And I'm not sure that we should go down that route. I think it's interesting, if you read the document about it, you could almost read that, oh, we've got 362 new full-time jobs in the area. Clearly, that's not the case. There may be 362 full-time roles, but it sounds as if the majority of those will actually be coming from other locations. Having said that, staff do move, and it could be that there are some local employment opportunities for our residents as well. So I think that's something that we should also consider. I have to say, I think I agree with the concerns about the previous application. And actually, I think that the support for the Thames Valley Police, I think is a really key one that we can do here, that we are, it feels like a huge benefit. Clearly, I don't live in that area, but I do drive up and down the A4, unfortunately, rather a lot. And it does concern me about traffic, but that happens in all sorts of places, wherever we live in the district. And I think from the considerations that the officers have laid out before us, including the fact that a full drainage and flooding issues will be pre-assessed, as you say, and those conditions will be done before anything goes ahead, then actually if you would like me to submit to make a proposal, then I will.
Okay, thank you. I will come back to you on that proposal offer. Councillor Kander.
Hi, I'm going to say probably very similar things, but I wasn't a councillor and I wasn't in the original planning committee. Had I been, I would have objected to the height, I'll be honest, because I think the height is a big issue. For me, the two big issues have been height and flooding. I would tend to trust the officers in their assessment, particularly if they take account of looking at the assessment again with regards to the drop, or the fact that they are satisfied that irrespective of the drop, the conditions will be met. I think given that it's TVP and therefore people that we could trust from that perspective to be mindful of everything and all the rules that they have to take account of, rather than somebody else who we may not trust as much, I think would lead me to believe also that if something came up and something was found, it would be addressed in an appropriate way. I think economically, yes, not all the jobs are going to suddenly appear, but also there's a surrounding economy that's going to be bolstered by people having lunch and travelling and what have you. So overall, whilst I don't agree with the height, I think taking that as an exception now and to use Councillor Taylor's comment about, better the devil you know. If we were to push back on this now, first of all, we probably wouldn't get anywhere. And secondly, the worst case scenario could happen. And therefore, from that perspective, I think also I'm inclined to roll with what we have and take that on the chin and actually say this is probably not a bad thing, given irrespective of the height issue. That's
Okay.
it from me.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cossum. Councillor Stewart, you're happy to propose as we have detailed in front of us?
Yes, absolutely. So is that proposed to approve and grant planning
So
permission?
the full recommendation is to delegate to the development manager to grant planning permission, subject to the conditions listed on our paperwork this evening, and delegate to the development manager to issue a further decision notice to the applicant substantially the same as that below, but including parts of conditions that relate to confidential information, and to delegate to the development manager to issue decision notices, including making any minor or consequential amendments to conditions. Are you happy to propose on that basis?
I am.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Cossum equally?
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, we have a proposal and seconded. Can I have, by show of hands, your considered votes, please? In favour of? Thank you. And against? Thank you very much, Councillor Paul. And that should be everybody, so there are no abstentions. In that case, I declare that the proposal to approve the planning permission has been agreed, subject to the list of conditions stated. Congratulations, you have your approval. Members, officers, especially for the work that you've put in, including for this evening, the extra work that you've had to put in. Mr. Till from away on screen, and from everybody else that's contributed to the debate and the presentations this evening. Thank you very much indeed for your time and dedication to doing that. It is appreciated by all of us. And with no further business, I think we can close the meeting at that point. Just checking the agenda. Yeah, we have nothing further, so happy to close the meeting.